Okay, this is the voice of Max Ortlieb.
This is Charlie LeBeau.
This is Jimmy Dales.
This is Ryan Paddock.
So, for the Chromium Fence, I said that the theme was over-dedication to values and closed-mindedness.
I can sort of see that, where the purists want to have everything the same, and they're over-dedicating everything. Like, they took control of the government, and they basically took control and to dedicate and take
Right.
over the world.
Right, it's just that neither side really had that many moral obligations. They were just the opinions of groups, and they actually fought over it.
I think the two groups kind of relate to like Democrats and Republicans, kind of always like clearly devoted to one side and always are forcing people to join their group, and are always trying to take each other over.
And always trying to fight each other.
Yeah, they're always trying to fight
Fighting
each
over
other.
for power in like Congress and the Senate and everything like
Yeah.
that, and certain votes, and then
Yeah.
party leaders and everything like that. So I can see exactly what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
that definitely works because, like, people today, if you're not Democrat or Republican, you're basically just ignored. Those are really the only two parties that people
Mhm.
pay attention to.
I mean, it's true. But there are also, like, Don kind of represents some of the minorities where they, like, are devoted to a different group, like an independent.
Yeah.
Kind of
And-
like the Tea Party.
Yeah.
In a way. Yeah.
And, like, they're still there, but they're not as dominant.
Yeah, like they have different views than both majority of the parties, but they're just stuck in the middle of trying to avoid sticking to one of the main parties and just being their own self. Like, yeah, I see that.
Because they agree with both sides.
Yeah, but Don would also be like a libertarian kind of because he was one of the few people that didn't want control and didn't want to conform to a group. So,
All right. Well, my theme was man has to have conflict, and so essentially, since they're so far into the future, that they are literally fighting over anything humanly possible because they have such little flaws in this point in time. Like, for instance, they're just fighting over the evolution of man, like trying to breed and perfect them to make them better than what they actually are, and the naturalists just want to keep it as the way it is. Well, it's essentially like fighting over nothing. Like, oh, we're gonna use this paper instead of this kind of paper. Like,
yeah, I agree with you. So, do you guys think that, like what you were saying, if we actually got it to the point where our society was just perfect and flawless, do you think that humans would be lacking something? Like, do you think in life we require conflict?
Well, yeah, I mean, conflict's always been a part of human nature throughout history, and anything people ever do, there's always going to be disagreement. In a flawless society, I don't think it's really human to have no type of disagreement.
Coming from a Christian perspective, looking at the beginning of creation with Adam and Eve, that was a perfect, flawless society, and they had to change it. They were lacking something, and now look where we are now.
in a flawless society, you still try to find flaws, even though it is flawless, just to have the point of finding something that's different in other people and different in the world itself.
Right, like back to what Ryan said, like with Adam and Eve, and like the flawless situation, like people's curiosity will still lead to like bad types of things. Like Eve still like bit the apple, like the snake led her to kind of create an unflawed society and kind of screw things up. So like a flawless society wouldn't really last very long, even if we got to that point.
Do you think that either one of the groups, the naturalists or purists, do you think they would have been able to maintain like what they saw as a flawless society, or do you think that would have just led to even more conflict in the future?
I don't think it's ever really possible to have a society where there's no disagreement.
Yeah, it would have just led to more conflict because there's still the other party that doesn't want what the
Right.
party that is controlling of. Let's say the purists have complete control and they have the evolution going on, but then the naturalists still want to just keep it the way it is, and they're going to try to stop that at any cost possible. So there still is going to be conflict, even if one side has completely done everything they want to do. The other side is still going to try to fight back and get.
Right. So you want to move on to second variety?
Yeah, so my theme for second variety was man makes its own demise. And basically, I'm saying that just because man made the varieties, and now the varieties are trying to take over the world and destroy each other.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that because as a theme, I said humans underestimate their own creations. So it definitely works. Like, we focus so much on building something that we think will help us, and it could come back to bite us. Like, it kind of relates to that Black Mirror episode. How it just shows, like, even the small little luxuries like social media and things like that, they can definitely have negative impacts as well.
Right, like at a certain point, man could develop, kind of take science past what we can control, and kind of like cheat nature, and then it comes back around and kind of screws us over. And what a lot of kind of stories like this tell us.
It even says on page 422, he had been right about the bomb after all. It had been designed with knowledge of other types, the David type and the wounded soldier type, and the Klaus type. Not designed by human beings. It had been designed by one of the underground factories apart from all human contact. And that can basically go back to that the humans are underestimating their own power.
So, yeah, so
So my theme for second variety was man not being able to tell apart the robots and the humans. So it's essentially saying, like, you're trying to find the difference in the race, but yet you can't because everyone is like the same. But yet in our society we think that everyone's different, yet they're not.
yeah, I get what you're saying. Like, how can we see a difference between the civilians in one country versus another if we, like the author is saying, we can't even tell the difference between a human and a robot. It's just devaluing war and mocking the countries that do nothing but fight.
And that one of the countries that does is us, and for some reason we can't tell the difference between a terrorist and a peaceful Muslim, even though the terrorists are a few out of, or a minority out of the Muslim population, but it's still, we can't tell the difference, and we bomb everyone.
So, like, tying it to today's society like that, it's just essentially racism to a point where you're, like, isolating a whole group of civilians, yet that group, not all of them, or maybe just a few part of them, or maybe not even that group does that, but yet we still put that label onto it.
Yeah, I agree with, like, especially back to what Ryan said, but you said that basically we don't see a difference in race when sometimes there is, like, comparing the difference between terrorists and just regular everyday Muslims. But I think we tend to do the opposite as well. We tend to we tend to see a difference when there isn't one. For example, we would help American civilians if they were in need, but currently there's things going on like the Syrian civil war, and lots of Americans don't even know about it because it's not on homeland, and just because they, have darker skin, we just don't even think about them.
Or even looking at looking in history, looking at like the Soviets, like they're still the same shade or not shade, but the same kind of type as Americans, and we can't really tell the difference between Soviets and Americans. Only way we can tell the difference is by the way they speak. And if you look at that, there was really no difference.
Right, and with that thought, we will wrap up our first discussion.